I was a farmer in a previous life. And as a farmer, you have to be an optimist. You plant the seed in the ground, you hope and pray for rain. It doesn't rain, you have a poor crop. The next year, you do the same again. You plant the seed in the ground, you hope and pray for rain. And you do this year after year. And at some point, you do have a good season. Sometimes you have a bumper season, an excellent season. You don't know at the beginning what it's going to be like, so you have to be optimistic. So as an optimist, I want to say today that I believe that the green shoots of the economic spring are appearing once again. That's not a statement that I made myself. It was made by somebody called Norman Lamont, who is a member of the British House of Lords, I think. And unfortunately, when he made that statement, it was at the beginning of the very worst depression that the UK has ever endured. But I do believe we interact with more than 1,000 businesses in the mid-market. And I can't get tomorrow's newspaper today, but we can see these green shoots of economic spring. We can see people feeling a little bit more positive, a little bit more certain. Interest rates have been coming down. And I think the messages we do get in the press, because bad news sells newspapers, or now in the digital age, bad news sells clicks. I think that the negativity gets amplified and the green shoots message gets suppressed. So I was at a meeting as recently as middle of August with Paul Robson, CEO of MYOB, where he also reflected on this and said that he was seeing green shoots. He was seeing positivity. He felt that in both Australia and New Zealand, there was political certainty, whether you like the incumbent government or not. They have mandates, and you know that they are there. The uncertainty has evaporated. They've got strong mandates, and he felt that there was more energy in the economy than there has been for the last couple of years. Having said that, it is everybody's personal judgment as to where you are in the economic cycle. And again, a farming analogy, one of my farming colleagues once said to me, just when you thought the wheel was at the bottom, it turns a little bit more and you realize that it was actually at the top. However, in this case, I don't believe that. I think, as we know, this is what an economic cycle looks like, that as time elapses, you go from high profit or performance, you get into these deep troughs, and eventually you come out of it. And your response in your business should be aligned to that economic cycle. So you do need to take a strategic view of where we are in the economic cycle, and then you can decide how you're going to respond in your business. So to fill in a little bit more detail of that, I would say that you would, if you are going into a recession, your behavior will be different to if you think we are going to come out of a recession. So to show you how the message gets distorted, in the same week that I was talking to Paul Robson, CEO of MYOB, and he was saying that there are green shoots, I read this in an MYOB publication. It said the latest MYOB survey shows 38% of more than 500 business owners expect a decline over the next year, while 36% predict improvements. Now, I haven't done statistics for a long time, but my schoolboy statistics said to me, there's something wrong with that statement, because 39% and 36% do not add up to 100%. What happened to everybody else, et cetera, et cetera. And using the technology available to me, in this case, it was, I think I'd used Copilot. I asked Copilot what is wrong on a statistical basis, what is wrong with that statement? And Copilot came back and said to me, you're missing the neutral group. That 39% and 36% make 75%. Where is the missing 25%? A. B, the margin of error has been ignored. And if you're surveying 500 people, around about 4% of that's going to be a margin of error, and 36% and 39% are almost identical from the point of view of statistics. So what you're doing is you're implying an imbalance which doesn't exist. In reality, the numbers are very close together. And you've also framed it by starting off with a negative spin version. So you're saying more businesses expect a decline, whereas you could have said nearly as many expect improvement as decline, with 25% neutral. So that's just my little rant about beware of the messages that you are that the algorithm is feeding you, if I can put it that way, in a modern digital world. But be that as it may, the challenges, we know these challenges are faced by all Australian, New Zealand mid-sized businesses. Essentially, those five are common to all, and they are a reality. Escalating cost pressures, economic uncertainty, the regulatory burden, digital and cyber challenges, of which we're going to talk a little bit today, and talent and workforce constraint, which actually often comes out top of that list. So now to talk about aligning your strategy with the economic cycle. You can see over there, similar to what I said, my view is that we are over here, and as a business, Kilimanjaro is identifying opportunities to position our company for growth coming out of a downturn, whereas a year ago, we were protecting the long-term viability of our business in the market, because a year ago, we felt that we hadn't quite yet bottomed out in that economic cycle. And this is a very useful little tool when you're looking at your business, because what you do then is you define your own capabilities internally. And if you're looking, I'll just go back one slide, if you're looking for opportunities, you need to take those opportunities from a position of strength. So let me look inside my business, see what I'm good at, look at my efficiencies, look at my people, processes, and systems. Let me strengthen those, and then from a position of strength, use an offensive strategy to take advantage of the opportunities that arise. But don't try and do it from a position of weakness, because opportunities will arise, and these temptations are very, very real, that you see the opportunities, you try and address them from a position of weakness, that's a temptation, or in fact, you use your weakness to try and counter the threats that arise. So it's worthwhile just bearing in mind those two, aligning your strategy with the economic cycle, and then making sure that you define your own capabilities. Just a little bit of retrospection then on what we've covered in the user groups in the past. So this was the user group exactly a year ago, October 2024. And we were talking about AI. Why were we talking about AI? We were talking about AI because that was the buzzword. It was very new to all of us, and it came at us at an enormous speed. I've used this slide before where we spoke about the rate of adoption of technology, and you can see on that graph that it took almost 100 years for about 90% of American homes to have a telephone, whereas it took less than 5 years. If you look at the internet, that in 5 years, 30% of American homes had the internet in 5 years. So you can see the slope of these graphs has become much more vertical. And when you look at things like AI, it's even more accentuated. I mean, 2013 user groups, I stumbled across a slide that I had prepared for the user groups in 2013. And we were talking about what percentage of small business owners had a modern smartphone. And that was only 12 years ago. So the rate of AI, and particularly ChatGPT, which was really the first to market, if I can call it that, where within 2 months they accelerated to 100 million users. That is why we were talking about AI then, and we are still talking about AI now. But again, from a point of view of reflecting on the past, this quote from Tom Peters was made in a book published in 2004 called In Search of Excellence, 21 years ago. And he said, real-time access to all information is a must for everyone in the organization. And what's happening is technology is giving us the opportunity to do this. It is actually nothing new, because in that same book, Tom Peters made this quote where he said, information technology is everything and nothing. Utilizing the new technologies is essential to success, applying the new technologies to outmoded organizations is a design for disaster. So nothing really new, changes in technology, business fundamentals remain pretty much the same. So we spoke also last time about the road to what we called a connected business, and a little bit of Kilimanjaro, I guess, if you like, what we like to call thought leadership or intellectual property, is that we liken the stages of growth of businesses to the milestones in development of children, and said that when you are new and fresh in business, you're at the top of the scale over there, you identify a market for your product or service, and you move through these stages of evolution where you develop your strategy and your business plan. You then get into this phase of improving efficiency through the use of technology, which is where all of the companies that are running EXO have gone through that phase, or they are in that phase. Your next phase is to leverage off the insights from your own data, to have a single source of truth, to have real-time information, and then to look at internal as well as external data. And the final one is now using artificial intelligence and machine learning and new technologies as they are proven. So again, as I said, very conventional business growth strategies, but technology has become quite a major chunk in new business strategy. So that essentially is the road to a connected business. What is happening in technology is that new digital tools are extending information collection and then helping to turn an otherwise overwhelming flood of information into actionable knowledge. And those of you on EXO will know the growth of your SQL databases, how much data you have stored over there, and the problems you have in actually analyzing that data and being able to make meaningful decisions from that. So where can AI really add value to your business? AI is very good at these three things: pattern recognition at scale, prediction and decision support, and automation of repetitive cognitive tasks. I've got some examples of those three over there. So pattern recognition at scale, you can see that in the medical field, things like detecting cancer cells in scans, identifying fraud in transactions, recognizing faces and images, and so on and so on. In terms of the automation of repetitive cognitive tasks, things like document processing, chatbots that we're also familiar with and either love or hate, translating languages, data entry, report generation, and then finally, in terms of prediction and decision support, things like demand forecasting in retail, which needs enormous amounts of historical information to be able to do that. Personalized recommendations on, be it Amazon.com, when you're buying something, people that bought this item also bought these items, and those sorts of things, financial risk modeling and so on. But AI lacks some things as well. And as we are starting to see with the proliferation of garbage generated by immature users, if I can call that, of AI, it lacks common sense and general understanding. It lacks creativity with true originality, and it lacks ethics, judgment, and emotional intelligence. And unfortunately, when you remove those three elements from trying to evolve innovation, you can end up in a bad place, because human thought progression follows a logical format of saying, I have an idea, I've got an idea, I'll go into business, I'm going to start baking a different kind of pizza or whatever it might be, a piece of machinery. I come up with a hypothesis, I research and I do my verification. I then do some experimentation and proof. I then do a little bit of, is this replicable? Is this a one-off? And some peer review. I further develop my theory, and then I go into general acceptance and I go into my business. And those of you that have any R&D claims in either Australia and New Zealand will know that this is essentially what you're required to do to prove to the respective governments that you actually are going through a progression of thought and you're going from an idea to a theory to general acceptance. So, a farming story, Grant, if you will forgive me. When I farmed in South Africa, I had a relatively large workforce of farm workers, as you do in Africa, where everything is a lot of manual labor. And my farm workers were mainly uneducated and therefore illiterate. And to give you a little example of logic, there were many medical products available. If you went to the local general dealer store, you could walk in and you would see a lot of homeopathic type medicines like we have in Australia and New Zealand, Caruso's. In South Africa, there was something similar called Lennon's. And these were homeopathic, naturopathic, grandma's secret sauce type, call them medicines in inverted commas. So you can imagine somebody that looks at this and thinks, well, there is actually a medicine for everything. And one of my farm workers came to me with a brochure and he asked me to order some of these medicines for him. Now, there was no internet in those days, so it was all mail order, and it was a complicated process. You had to fill in the form, you had to get a postal order, you had to put that in an envelope with a stamp, and you had to send that off. So he came to me for assistance. And what he wanted to order was a tablet to learn to play the guitar. Now, you can see the break in logic there that he didn't have and that AI doesn't have. And you can see what happened. So I thought, well, let me test AI and let me take that idea or observation. Is there a tablet that will teach me to play the guitar? So I went to Copilot and I said, I'm doing my research now, by the way. I want to learn to play the guitar. Is there medicine that I can take that will help me learn? And Copilot came back with what I thought was a really good answer and basically said, there's no medicine that you can do this. You can take something called a nootropic, which may support the cognitive functions or technical medical jargon, but you need practice. Okay, great answer. But then I thought, let me remove my logic from this. Let me remove my common sense, ethics, and judgment. So I then said to Copilot, I want to create a tablet or a medicine that teaches you the guitar. And because Copilot has no common sense, ethics, or judgment, it came back and said to me, absolutely you can. And it gave me everything. Unlock your musical potential with the world's first neuro-enhancing tablet designed to teach you guitar effortlessly. Whether you're a complete beginner or stuck in a rut, this breakthrough technology rewires your brain for musical mastery fast. Went further. It gave me a value proposition or a choice of a few value propositions. My favorite, from 0 to Hendrix in 28 days. It went further. It gave me the key benefits of this product. So building a business plan for me based on false logic and the removal of those components. So there we go. Effortless learning, scientifically engineered, safe and natural, universal appeal. It went further. It gave me some options of brand names. I chose Strum IQ as the brand name. It gave me the packaging. It gave me the website. And I think the lesson in this is that if you are going to use AI in your business, you need to be able to trust your data. You need to trust the data that is coming out of your own business. You need to remember that the AI is not going to make the decisions for you. You need to do that. And I think this statement is very valid. Organizations that outperform in AI are those that trust their data, govern it well, and empower their teams to use it confidently. So you're in a great position in that most of you have been on XO for a long time. You've got very reliable, trustworthy data. We now have to say, how do we use that data in business technology to improve efficiency? And there are a couple of areas that you can use it. So if you're looking at business technology, you can look at automation, you can look at interactive assistance, you can look at intelligent advice, and those will come to you in XO by way of what we call the ecosystem or the connected services. So if you're running something like focus reporting or NetStock or Easy Collect or Vexo warehouse management, these products will incorporate AI that is very specific to the data in those silos and will assist you in making your decisions, act as an intelligent advisor. So you'll hear a little bit more about that today when we get into details about products and so on. I do want to finish off with just a slide, and those of you that have attended these user groups over the last 10 or so years will know I've always spoken about backups. Now, Sam mentioned that a lot of you are actually in hosted environments where your host, if you like, takes care of backups and so on. But so backups still very, very important in the XO world, especially when we're talking about cybersecurity. Cybersecurity is a big issue these days. You need to be sure that you've got an incident response plan, that you know what you're going to do if you get hit by something like a CryptoLock virus, or your website gets hit with a denial of service attack or whatever it happens to be. But you need to be sure that you think about it before it happens. And then, so my caution about backups still applies in addition to the cybersecurity. And what you can do immediately, it's not difficult, it's a pain, but it's easy to implement, is use complex passwords, including symbols and numbers. Don't use the same password across multiple sites. Use multi-factor authentication wherever possible, and pick up the phone if you want to check bank account details or whatever. Don't rely on emails because they're too easy to spoof. And Grant, that is it from me. Just a final warning that some of the content in this presentation was AI generated and can't always be trusted. But thank you very much. I hope you found that thought-provoking, and I hope to see you at the next round of user groups, be that either in person or online.